is that? Oh, what is that?
Dude, I think being an animator has actually got to be like the top 5 worst jobs in the entire world, next to unironically thinking that YouTube is a sustainable long-term career. Because not only do you have to sacrifice days of your very limited lifespan into animating the jiggle physics of someone's arse cheeks in Big Mouth, but then you have to come home to some dickhead tweeting out your intentionally exaggerated smear frame and calling that badly animated. The animation industry has got to be like the closest thing we have to modern day slavery, where there is always like a direct link between how good something looks and how long it's been since the people animating it have seen their wife and children. Like the dude that animated this cut in Jujutsu Kaisen, you want to know how much they got paid? $17, okay? Imagine your reward for like 10 hours of work being the fucking Grinch meal. And dude, if I was working under these kind of deadlines but was still giving it my absolute best shot, and then found out that people were petitioning to remake the show I was working on, the only thing going 24 frames a second would be a bullet into my skull. Because, you know, it turns out that when you exploit people's passion and pay them exclusively in McDonald's food bundles, you end up with some pretty wonky looking shows. With all that being said though, it doesn't mean we still can't laugh about it. So I'm feeling pretty glad that it's spring because we're going to be doing some cherry picking. But first, it's time for everyone's favorite part. So I went to a rodeo with some friends the other day, which is related, I promise. And aside from the fact that we got rained on the entire time and realized about 15 minutes in that we did not consider at any point how the cow felt about it, you know, when we got back as a palate cleanser, I thought we should put on Brokeback Mountain for no particular reason at all. But then, of course, when I looked it up, I found out that the FBI has banished this movie from existence, apparently. You cannot watch this thing anywhere. There was a result for Netflix, but when you click on it, it just says it wants you to remind them that they're meant to have movies on there. And it was only thanks to our savior, Proton VPN, that we were able to spend the next 2 hours watching Heath Ledger give Jake Gyllenhaal backshots. With Proton, you can explore more content by traveling the world with just a click of a button. You can instant transmission to 110 countries across 16,000 servers to get access to strange foreign lands like Australian Netflix, where all of One Punch Man Season 3 is unfortunately readily available. Proton's a VPN that cares about your privacy and can help you browse the web securely without anyone ever finding out how many episodes deep into My Stepmom's Daughter is My Ex you are. It's faster than other VPNs, it's got an integrated ad blocker, and is especially going to come in handy accessing blocked and restricted sites in case you live in a dumbass country that's about to ban social media for a quarter of the population. And with their Black Friday deal going on at the moment, you can get 75% off a Proton VPN subscription for a limited time with the code on screen. So you can get all this for the same price as the budget for One Punch Man Season 3. Thanks so much to Proton for helping me pay down my mortgage, and now back to the video. Anyway, so, One Punch Man's like a show about this dude named Saitama who's like so strong that his only weakness is the Norwood scale. And like it didn't need to go as hard on the animation as Killer Bean, but it did it anyway, and it's what makes it one of the only anime that I'm not publicly embarrassed to be a fan of. Which was because everyone behind the scenes was putting in like way more effort than they needed to. Like this level of quality was way above the standard for a show like this. They were just doing it purely for the love of the game. And so you'd think with like a show popular enough to get people to willingly cosplay as a bald guy, that they like want to get on to following up that shit as quickly as possible and with the same amount of care and time, which is why they took 4 entire years to put out another season and gave it to a studio mostly known for doing romance shows. And we all knew it was over the second we got the teaser for season 2 that was comprised of so many cuts to black that you actually got like a first-person view into watching yourself die inside in real time. To be fair, it's kind of hard to notice there's anything wrong with the animation in season 2 when you're too busy having a seizure anytime anything moves. But 3 years on, we started hearing about One Punch Man 3, and I was like, okay, come on, surely this time, baby. Who'd they get to make it this time? The same exact guys who fucked up season 2? Okay. But like, they announced it in 2022, and it was only coming out this year, so surely they spent that time cooking up some absolutely devious shit. And nope, it's actually even worse than it was before, and they spent that 3 years animating 1 frame a day.
But then it dawns on you that it's completely silent. No one is doing anything.
But to be fair, it's kind of hard to clown on the animation when none of it is actually animated. So far, season 3, it looks like a freaking Draw My Life, where every episode is competing to see whether it can have a lower amount of frames or IMDb score. It's so unbelievably arse that people have been going back and apologizing to season 2 because at least those episodes had more movement than the goddamn subtitles. Like, genuinely, for the entirety of the 1st and 6th episodes, the only thing that move are like the lip flaps and my hand toward the nearest noose. So the question then, aside from what the fuck, is what happened? And it turns out that these guys were apparently only given 6 months to crank out the entire season, so making it even barely watchable would have been impossible when even the human body takes longer than that to make something that looks like a sentient ball sack. And I mean, it's not like it's all bad, okay? There is some good shit in there sometimes for 30 seconds out of a 24-minute episode, but like the rest of it legitimately makes me feel like I'm watching the anime equivalent of like a day 1 Bethesda game, like with this guy that randomly generates boobs for a couple shots and how they forgot to finish drawing the rest of this dude's hair. But then as I was making this video, episode 8 came out and... Are those frames? in my one frame, man. Oh my god, did he just blink? We're so back. The thing is with anime is that if they accidentally end up making the entire 3rd season of 7 Deadly Sins look like a 2008 Newgrounds Flash animation.
Will someone come look at this? Look what they did to my boy! Look at his legs! Oh no, look at his legs!
That they sometimes get to like redo some of it later in the Blu-ray version, where usually the selling point is getting like an uncensored or extended edition. But in One Punch Man's case, it'll probably just be having the show actually move. And even with shit like Blue Lock, where I got to witness firsthand the Twitter-wide memorial service for the quality of the show when its 2nd season had less frames than a 13-year-old's CapCut edit. Usually if a show is going to have like a huge animation drop-off, it'll be like in between seasons, unless you're Uzumaki from last year, which had a first episode that looked amazing and was fluid as hell, was gorgeous, mwah. But then started speedrunning the fastest fall-off in history when you got to episode 2 and immediately noticed that everyone looked different and also forgot how running works. And then it stayed like that for the entire rest of the show, which was crazy for a show with 4 episodes in total. And just like One Punch Man, on its own, the rest of the show looks fine. Like, it's not Story of Undertale or anything. It's just that when people have like that immediate comparison, they're like a lot harsher about them hiring the guys from Invincible. Oh, and speaking of, now that we're at a point with modern TV where they can't even get shit with real people out faster than the same time it takes to get a degree, when you get something like Invincible that spent years on its 1st season but was super popular, they weren't going to wait until half their audience was in a nursing home to do it again. So when Amazon announced that they were going to give us yearly seasons of Invincible, both the fans and the animators were losing their shit about it for entirely different reasons. Season 2 was definitely like a drop-off from the 1st, but it wasn't anywhere near as noticeable as Season 3, where, oh my god, bro, I'm sorry, I love the show, but those first few episodes were so stiff that I almost did my usual babysitting routine and dropped that shit. But as much as people were like clowning on them for dragging PNG images across the screen in a multi-million-dollar Amazon show, and had people complaining that Angstrom didn't have his 4K Ultra HD ballsack texture like in the comic, like, dude, you try and draw this shit 500 times an episode. And obviously it doesn't automatically make the whole show complete dog shit, because there's way more to a series than just how it looks, which I can definitely tell you as a Ruby fan. I also think they kind of like screw themselves over when they do these teasers that they put out in between seasons that look infinitely better than the entirety of the show, because as it turns out, it's a lot easier to animate 4 minutes of people yapping than 8 hours of an entire show in a year. When Dragon Ball came out of retirement with a new movie about 10 years ago, they went, yeah, nice job, guys. Anyway, we want you to make a full weekly show out of this in like a month. Okay, thank you, bye-bye. Which is how you end up with like the most iconic anime of all time, debuting its first show in 18 years with what looks like a kindergartner's fan art competition. I was only strong enough to handle like 10 episodes of Dragon Ball Super after every single frame looked like the cover of a how to draw manga book. But I did hear that they like locked in and it got better by the end of it. Plus last year we got the newest show, Dragon Ball Daima, that proves that when something doesn't have to come out weekly and isn't stretched out to 200 episodes, it can actually look pretty good. That's crazy. I just think it's because we're like drowning in so many goated shows right now that shit like this stands out way more than it used to, compared to like 40 years ago where the best we were getting were like regular primetime PowerPoint presentations all being outsourced to a single Japanese child. And again, like they had to get this shit out like every week, okay? So they couldn't afford to make Knuckles not look like a potato. The OG Transformers is not a show that I would ever publicly recommend to anyone that has eyes, but like for a weekly animated series, it was so good that it didn't matter if Optimus sometimes didn't have a mouth, then they all existed in a universe where consistent size was a suggestion. After 2 seasons though, they did a big budget movie that had such an animation glow up that it left them about 15 cents left over to fund the 3rd season, that they then shipped out to the cheapest overseas studios that they could find, that had to go through so many different people, all of whom absolutely did not give a shit about what they were making. Is how you end up with 30 episodes that look like this. Symptoms of outsourcing your animation to underpaid children who get financially compensated less than the shits they give include layering issues where the characters sometimes melt into the shadow realm, reanimated corpses of people that were meant to have died, half the cast switching sides in between shots, everyone knowing shadow clone jutsu, and sentient clothing. And animation errors are fine, like they're always gonna happen, but like not when the main villain of season 3 is whoever was in charge of the layering. And even after all of that, it's still technically more animated than One Punch Man 3. Speaking of, in case you're wondering what the studio that made the 1st season is up to now, there's nothing that absolutely obliterates your immersion of a show quite like getting jump scared by some ugly ass Toy Story dog miraculous ladybug ass looking CGI. Obviously they have to do this sometimes so you don't end up with the horse in Spice and Wolf. The hard part is blending them together well enough without making it look like a Smiling Friends bit.
Gosh, Brenda, your flowers sure look pretty.
Well, thank you very much, Turkey.
Can we watch something else? It's about to get really good.
Then there's this show called X-Arm that you can tell was funded by Crunchyroll because you've only probably heard of it from the top 10 worst anime of all time list. Because it's a direct result of what happens when you hire a bunch of people who don't know how to make anime to make an anime.
What the fuck is... What?
where because they didn't want to make a model for anything that only appeared once, sometimes its characters don't exist in the same dimension. This man is a drawing, this man is PS3 graphics, someone is chain smoking through all the fight scenes, the main dude's bedroom is from Google Images, and they had to censor a kiss from the manga, but not because they were homophobic, just because they didn't know how to animate it. As a kid, watching Transformers Energon for the first time felt like the childhood equivalent of being waterboarded with how the whole show looks like they animated it in Gmod, which I know we're saying a lot when at that point I was still regularly suffering through shit like the Numberjacks.
I'm the puzzler, look at me.
And doing a show like this in 3D sounds like a good idea when you consider that drawing super detailed robots over and over is kinda hard, as any survivor of watching Transformers Armada can tell you, but not when the models are so physically incapable of expressing any emotion whatsoever that they have to like randomly cut to like these super detailed hand-drawn animations as if it's like a shitty Wii game jumping from the cutscene to the gameplay. And then even 20 years later, the bar is still on the toilet, because when we got Transformers Earthspark, which initially looked like the first show in the series in the last decade to actually try, until they realized how much that cost and then gave the next 2 seasons over to the guys that made the Megamind sequel, and now the show looks like the Megamind sequel.
Surrender, thieves! You won't get away with this!
But even that looks like One Punch Man Season 1 compared to Rhapsody Street Kids, a movie that's set in the same place that everyone who made it is going, which is the deepest circle of hell.
You might be smart with books, but you sure are stupid.
A world comprised entirely of KidPix assets, where perspective is a suggestion, and only one thing can move at a time because every person looks like a fucking FNAF animatronic.
Smithy!
Hey, Nicole Duck! I mean dinosaur!
It's like if someone made a feature-length version of the cutscenes from Sonic Adventure. Characters don't so much move as they do just sort of immortal slide into place. Some of them just start emoting at random intervals, and it has the only dog I've seen more fucked up than the one in Toy Story.
Aw, come on, Smithy. Didn't your mommy teach you to share?
Anyway, I could stand here all day talking about shit like Joshua and the Promised Land and Food Fight, but like at the end of the day, I would still rather take this absolutely shit-ass shot of Garou moonwalking down a cliff done by an actual human than like any of the nerds that keep chucking it in a computer and pretending that it's better, okay?